soon. So what we've seen is perhaps it could have been worse.
It absolutely could have been worse. The tube is a very dangerous environment. You're very deep underground. There have been terrible fires in the tube in the past. The emergency personnel there take it very seriously, and they're very, very professional. But it is a tough environment to save lives in the middle of some kind of disaster.
Well, we're talking about tunnels that were initially dug in the 1850s, a system that opened in 1863, the world's first subway. So I imagine, certainly at that time, there weren't thoughts about this kind of situation. So I imagine it makes it very difficult for the rescue teams to do what they need to do.
It does. And the unexploded ordnance or unexploded bomb, I wouldn't be at all surprised if they find more of them. In Madrid, there were about, I think, 13 bombs that went off and about 6 that didn't go off. So there may well be more out there that didn't go off or haven't gone off yet.
So, but the ominous thought here is that you have people who planned this, executed it, who are alive and well, watching this CNN broadcast right now, potentially.
I think it's quite likely. And the security services in London are going to be pursuing every possible lead to find those people. They had a number of groups and individuals under surveillance. They've had some major takedowns and some plots that they've thwarted. London has been a very active area for counterterrorism operations in the last 5 years. And so the security services will be upset that they let this one slip through, but they're going to turn over every stone, I'm sure, to find out who did it and take them down before they can strike again.
Richard, you've worked these problems from the inside. We have a statement that was just handed to me from Michael Chertoff, Secretary of Homeland Security, and he talks about, of course, sympathy and condolences to those who were victims of this attack. But then he says, we do not have any specific intelligence indicating this type of attack is planned in the United States, but we are constantly evaluating both intelligence and our protective measures, and will take whatever actions are necessary. What are the necessary actions right now, you think?
Well, certainly there will be heightened security at transit systems throughout the country. The security at these transit systems is not federal responsibilities. It's the state and local responsibility, or it's the transit police responsibility in each local area. So the Department of Homeland Security will be communicating with those agencies to try to ensure that they're at heightened level of vigilance, but it's probably unnecessary. They're all watching the news too. I think they'll be taking the same reaction that would be done even if the federal government hadn't been having big meetings right now. So there will be heightened vigilance at U.S. transit systems today, in part to make sure there are no attacks here in the U.S., and in part to reassure the traveling public that the government is on top of it.
What, is the government really on top of it, though, do you think?
Well, it's a good question. After Madrid, a year and a half ago, we did a pretty careful study. I was still in government at the time, of our rail security and transit security systems. And frankly, we spend an awful lot of money on air security, about $6 billion screening passengers at airports, and a tiny fraction of that, about $50 million on transit security systems. So the federal government's presence in surface transportation system security is really very modest. And I think people will be asking again today whether that should be expanded.
Well, I mean, they call it the Transportation Security Agency, but it's really a misnomer, isn't it?
It's really an aviation security agency. And that's a function of where the Congress set the deadlines and imposed very specific mandates. There were no statutory mandates for the federal government's intervention in surface transportation, only in air transportation.
Richard Falkenrath, stay close. We'll be back in touch with you as the day progresses.
Thanks, Miles.
An update of sorts, if we can get to it. 45 people dead. That report coming from ITN this morning. It is expected, though, that all the numbers you're going to hear of the dead and the injured are quite fluid, because as we have heard from the scene, there are some bodies that remain in the tunnels where there is access to them, but it is now a crime scene. And so as the investigation progresses, they will then be able to move those bodies. So the number we're getting from ITN, 45 people dead, that number, one would imagine, will change. The question, of course, today and now and as of this morning, who did it? Nick Robertson has been tracking and dealing with many of these groups, and he's in Atlanta this morning. Nick, there's a group that's taking responsibility, but it's a group that no one's ever heard of.
That's right. They're calling themselves a secret group of al-Qaeda's jihad in Europe. Their claim was posted on a website used by radical Islamist groups. However, anyone can post anything to that particular website. So the very fact that the website's been used before for such types of claims is not an indication that this claim or this group is is verifiable. Indeed, at this stage, we haven't been able to take this verification any further. But what this group claims on this statement, they claim that they have perpetrated this attack in London against the British government, who they accuse of being crusaders. They say that this is revenge for the massacres they claim that the British government is responsible for in Iraq and Afghanistan. They praise what they call their Mujahideen fighters. They indicate that this operation has been in planning for some time. But again, this group, we have not heard of them before. The secret group of Al-Qaeda's Jihad in Europe has not been heard of before. This website has been used by such claims, but not an indication that that there is any truth or verification behind this particular claim. Terrorism experts we have talked to so far today say there are certainly indications that this particular attack bears the hallmarks of Al-Qaeda and Al-Qaeda related groups' attacks in the past, in that it appears to have taken a good degree of planning, it appears to have taken a good and intense degree of preparation, and that it was carried out in a coordinated way at a number of different explosions over a relatively short period of time in a relatively small pace, in a relatively small area. So the hallmarks, experts are telling us, the hallmarks of this attack bear the symptoms of Al-Qaeda. This group claims to be an Al-Qaeda or Al-Qaeda related group, but again, no verification of this particular claim at this time, Soledad.
Nick, after the question who, of course, the question is how. And when you hear some of the details, especially, I guess, the descriptions by eyewitnesses, are investigators, even at this early hour, able to piece together what may have happened? I mean, is it a series of suicide bombers on board the trains or on board a bus? Is it something that's remotely detonated somehow that would cause multiple explosions? Any information from investigators on that yet?
We're not hearing anything officially from any of the investigators. The only indication that we've had so far was an unofficial report at a very early stage by the fire services in London, and this was a conversation that they had with an emergency responder group that deals with chemical, biological and radioactive incidents as part of the emergency planning for London. The fire service in London saying that there was no radiological element associated with this particular attack. Further than that, we have not heard from the security services that are sifting through the wreckage. We do know that the sites have now been turned from rescue sites into crime scenes that are being investigated. The very fact, however, that some of these attacks, 3 of them, occurred bombs apparently detonated on underground trains in London, is an indication that perhaps, unlike the attack in Madrid and other bombs that are used by Al-Qaeda and Al-Qaeda related groups, it seems unlikely that these bombs on the underground system in London and the tube system would have been detonated remotely by cellular mobile telephones. The reason that cellular telephone network does not work on the underground system, on the tube system in London, so this indicates that perhaps the bombs were triggered by timers. Perhaps it indicates that they were indeed detonated by suicide bombers. But again, this is all speculation. There is no information to give any basis to truth for these insights at this time by the investigation team in London. However, one detail that did emerge from a reporter on the scene who spoke to somebody who survived one of the blasts, they said, the eyewitness said that one of the blasts occurred when 2 of these tube trains, 2 of the underground trains, past each other. Now that would indicate that as far as the attackers were concerned, if that was done through a timing device on the explosives, for them, that would have been very lucky timing. It may also be an indication, and again, this is just speculation, again, it may be an indication that this particular bomb was perhaps detonated by a suicide bomber who could see the other train coming and realize he or she could potentially cause maximum death and injury at that time, Soledad.
I want to ask you about a development potentially in another story, Nick, before I let you go. And you've been talking about this group that's taken responsibility on the web. unconfirmed at this point. We're also getting information, this coming from the Associated Press this morning, saying that there is a web posting that apparently al-Qaeda is claiming that it has killed Egypt's top envoy in Iraq. You'll recall, of course, Iyad al-Sharif disappeared on Saturday night after he left his house, and he was driving all by himself to buy a newspaper. His vehicle was found the next day, and there was a statement online that was attributed to al-Qaeda asserting responsibility for the kidnapping. What can you tell us about this, Nick? It's not related, but of course, if indeed al-Qaeda is the group behind the bombings, it is tangentially related.
Absolutely. If this claim is indeed correct, and again, this particular claim we don't have any way of verifying at this time, but it would be unlike al-Qaeda in Iraq that's headed by Abu Musab al-Zarqawi. It would be unlike that group to make such a statement and then not back it up with some videographic or other evidence later. So although we cannot verify it, again, perhaps there is some grain of truth in it, and certainly it indicates over the weekend that groups, insurgent groups, terror groups operating inside Iraq chose to increase their number of attacks against diplomats, attacking a Pakistani diplomat who subsequently left the country, targeting a Bahraini diplomat who was injured in his arm. He was attacked while driving in Baghdad as well. So it does seem to indicate an increasing effort by insurgents in Iraq to target diplomats. This may be one step further, Soledad.
All right, Nick Robertson. Nick, we'll check back with you in just a little bit. Miles?
We have reporters all over the place on this story, including some of our friends at ITN, the independent television network in Great Britain. Dan Rivers is one of the correspondents for ITN. He joins us in front of Scotland Yard, where obviously an active investigation is being spearheaded at this point. Dan, what are they telling you there at this juncture? Obviously, they got their hands full.
They're very busy. They have confirmed we are now looking at 4 explosions, 3 on the underground, on the metro system, if you like, and 1 on a bus. They haven't given us any more information about the number of fatalities, although when we asked the press officer here and said, is it in double figures, he simply pointed up and said, yes, and it's going up. So I think we can safely say it's well into double figures. There are some reports circulating that it's up to 45. I can't confirm that, but certainly a number of fatalities, a significant number of fatalities, and a significant number of injured people, both on the tube and on the bus. We know there is an ongoing rescue operation to try and get people out of the tube system, people trapped in the tube. I haven't got much more information about that, but certainly they are dealing with this as a terrorist attack. The head of the Metropolitan Police here, Sir Ian Blair, has described this as a coordinated attack, and there is due to be a police press conference at 3 o'clock our time in about half an hour or so, and we're hoping to get much more specific information. I've asked them if they've carried out any raids or made any arrests. They said no, not yet, but obviously they're working as hard as they can to try and find out who perpetrated this terrible, awful set of terrorist attacks on London this morning.
Dan, this is all in the category of speculation, but we've been talking to some experts who tend to think this might very well not have been a suicide attack and that there are suspects out there to be apprehended. What are you hearing there?
There was a rumour circulating that the police had shot dead a suicide bomber. The press officer I talked to emphatically said, no, that is not the case. They have not shot dead anyone. He could not confirm whether the attack on the bus was a suicide bombing. That was another rumour. But basically, he's sort of saying you have to wait till 3 o'clock our time to find out a little bit more. They're very, very busy here, as you can imagine. I've just driven right through the middle of town, and there are large parts of London which are cordoned off. There is a cordon around Buckingham Palace, the home of the Queen and the royal family. There is a cordon around the US Embassy, and there are various streets that are shut. There are lots and lots of uniformed officers around. I came right into London from the motorway system, the highway system, the main motorway coming in. There are big electronic signs saying London closed, avoid area. There are police on bridges, there are patrol cars on roundabouts. So it's quite an eerie feeling driving into the capital this morning.
London closed. Did you ever think you'd see a sign like that?
We always feared that we were going to see a sign saying that, and we always feared that we were going to hear of some terrible set of attacks. The police have been warning repeatedly over the last couple of years that it's not a question of if, it's when. I was talking to the head of the anti-terrorist police a couple of weeks ago at a reception, and he said they are still very concerned about the intelligence they're getting from the security service here, that an attack is imminent and that threat has not gone away. He was clearly right.
So there had been increased concern of late, or was that just a general level of concern that had been there for some time?
Yeah, no, there was no new intelligence, but I think there was this underlying, warning, terror warning of severe general. They have a sort of category system that had not increased in the last few days, but it had been in place for a number of weeks and months. But that had not increased. The next step up would have been severe specific, I think. That was not the case. There was no new intelligence. I asked that quite clearly to him. He said there was no warning, there was no indication that this attack was going to come. Clearly the timing, though, seems very significant at the opening of the G8 conference in Scotland, and just one day after London won its bid to host the Olympics in 2012.
And just to help people here in the United States fully understand the backstory on all of this, the people in the building behind you at Scotland Yard have been tracking for many years now a pretty vocal cadre of Islamist extreme behavior. And London, in many respects, has been a magnet for this sort of activity, has it not?
Absolutely. There have been a number of high-profile trials of domestic terror groups that have sprung up here. There was one recently that actually ended with a lot of the men being acquitted, but one of them was convicted, where they were accused of trying to use some sort of poison, ricin poison on the underground perhaps. That plot was foiled. There are a number of other plots which we know have been foiled, and there are a number of cases that are pending through the court system that we're unable to report at the moment. But I think that has led to a lot of cynicism in a way, because a lot of these cases are overlapping and it's difficult to report them, and there are restrictions imposed on what we can say about them, something that for you guys over in the States would be a very alien concept. We're not able to report on all of the trials here because of the reporting and restrictions imposed. That's led to a lot of people thinking, well, hang on, nothing's going on. They keep on saying there are all these terrorist groups out there, but we never see any arrests. Actually, there has been a lot of activity behind closed doors, and a lot of cases pending in the court system. And everyone I talk to in this building says, they are incredibly busy. And what's worrying is that all of these groups that they're dealing with tend to be homegrown. They tend to be British citizens from the Asian community, but British citizens who've lived here all their lives, whose parents have lived here all their lives, who have tended towards this extremism for one reason or another, and a lot of it is connected with the war in Iraq. That's the feeling that I get from the briefings I've got here.
Makes it a very difficult investigative problem, I'm sure. Dan Rivers, who is a correspondent with ITN at Scotland Yard, about 6 minutes from now, Dan is telling us we're going to have a press conference from police there, and we're going to do everything we can to bring that into you live. Soledad.
Well, we obviously continue to follow this story using all the resources of CNN worldwide, specifically our colleagues at CNN International and Christiane Amanpour. We are also following Hurricane Dennis and its progress. It is a Category 2 storm. It is on the verge, though, of becoming a Category 3 storm. Winds there over 111 miles an hour. We will update you on both of these stories right after this short break. Stay with us.
Homeland Security isn't just politics, it's personal. Don't you want to know what's going on out there? CNN Security Watch, the most reliable news about your family's safety and security every day, only on CNN.
I'm not a patient man. Waiting, not my thing. 1 hour photo, too slow. Fast food, not fast enough. Heartburn, who has the time? I take new Maximum Strength Zantac. It's so fast I can take it before a meal to prevent heartburn or after to quickly relieve tough heartburn. And the leading prescription, it can take a day or more to fully work. That's just crazy talk. For me, Maximum Strength Zantac.
Hey, buddy, move it.
I like this guy.
New Maximum Strength Zantac, the speed you need against heartburn. Get home delivery of the New York Times, now in more U.S. locations than ever before.
It tells me in depth what I want to know.
Even if you don't live in New York, I think it's great to get the New York Times.
Get home delivery of the New York Times at 50% off. Call 1-800-909-5577.
It gives you the national perspective.
They're worldwide, really.
Science Times, Arts and Leisure,
Sports, I clip articles, I clip recipes.
It's just a useful tool.
Make your day richer with the New York Times. Get home delivery at 50% off for 12 weeks, as low as $2.40 a week.
The New York Times really tries to get at the truth.
I respect the Times.
It's aerobics for the brain.
Sort of a how-to, when to, where to.
I started reading the New York Times when I was 7 years old.
It's part of my family tradition.
It's concise, it's evocative. It makes me feel like I'm in the know.
Get home delivery at 50% off, as low as $2.40 a week.
I feel like there's a broader scope.
It's fun to read.
It helps keep me inspired.
Now get home delivery in even more U.S. locations. Call 1-800-909-5577 for the New York Times at 50% off.
There's the Times and there's everything else.
What would you rather have, a car or a cleaner environment?
I would love to have a clean environment, but that's like asking someone to give up chocolate, to give up their car. It's just not going to happen. I love my car.
Welcome back, everybody, to our breaking news coverage as we get to the top of the hour. There are many developments to tell you about in the wake of these multiple explosions in London, 3 of them happening underground, one on a double-decker bus. We're getting an update on the number of injured. Apparently, one U.S. law enforcement official who's in contact with British authorities says that number of dead, 43, the number of injured in the hundreds. That confirmed by a hospital that said that they had treated somewhere around 300 people, many of them treated, then released, although they say there are a handful that had to be whisked immediately into surgery. We're also told by reporters at the scene that there is a rescue operation still underway. Many of these locations are very difficult to get to in the underground. Some of the people are stuck in the tunnels. In addition, those who have perished, those who have died in the attacks, they are leaving them in the tunnels in situ, we are told by authorities there. As they start their investigation, it is now a crime scene, and they do not want to move the bodies. There is a group that's taking responsibility, although some analysts are cautioning everyone to take these claims with a grain of salt. Our own Nick Robertson reported just a moment ago that this group, the secret group of Al-Qaeda Jihad in Europe, is claiming these attacks in revenge for military action in Afghanistan and Iraq. No confirmation, though, of that yet. Tony Blair is going to come and meet face-to-face with his law enforcement teams, Scotland Yard and others, talk to investigators about the progress that they are making. He made his resolve very clear when he addressed the world just a few hours ago, and then later as he was surrounded by the other leaders of the G8 who are in Scotland for their meeting. He departs that meeting. He will then meet with his investigators, then return to that meeting. Those meetings at the G8 go on without him, at least for the day. And President Bush, he is still at the G8 summit in Scotland. He addressed the world as well, saying that he stands behind, as our nation does, behind Britain, and in giving condolences as well to the people of Britain, and also specifically the families who have lost loved ones. Much happening, and we're going to keep you up to date with the very latest out of London this morning. Let's get right to Richard Quest. He's in London, close to one of the subway stations, I understand. Is that right, Richard?
Indeed, Soledad. Good morning to you from London. I'm outside or near Aldgate and Aldgate East tube station. This was the scene of one of the first explosions that took place this morning, and you can see behind me, it's just pretty much behind that bus where the tube station actually is. And what we have been hearing all morning, and you can probably hear even now, is absolutely dozens of emergency vehicles coming backwards and forwards. Interesting, different types. Some of them are disaster recovery vehicles. We've seen large numbers, for example, of ambulances, hospital doctor vehicles, even blood supply and medical supply vehicles. And what this is clearly telling us is that the numbers of injured are so large that the authorities are now moving around the various supplies between the hospitals to take care of those who have been injured and are undergoing treatment. The casualties numbers, as you were just reporting, Soledad, rising only within the last hour. What you have to understand about where I am, Soledad, Aldgate, this is almost like the heart, if you like, the edge of the financial district. This is the Wall Street, the edge of Wall Street in London. So these are the places where there would have been many hundreds and thousands of people congregating in the early hours of this morning when the explosion took place, making their way to the big investment banks and securities houses. At the moment, completely cordoned off. A deputy police commissioner, that's the number 2 in the force, told me a short while ago, obviously, now it's pretty much assumed it was terrorist activity, the forensic work underway to determine how big those explosions were, Soledad.
But Richard, the other stations as well, the other tube stations, I mean, all these seem designed to really get Londoners at the heart of their commute, at areas that are, as they are heading into the office. Give me a sense of the other tube stations as well. I understand some of them are big tourist hotspots, sure. and others are just, you know, besides being packed with people, sort of have a real significance too.
Yeah, you see, very similar to New York, where, for example, Grand Central Station is not only a major subway stop, it is also a mainline train station. So here in London, some of the others, Liverpool Street, King's Cross, even Edgware Road, they are all mainline stations. People who live in the suburbs, who live in the outer regions of London and in what we call the home counties, would take an overline train and then get the subway. What today has done, besides the terrible toll that it has exacted in terms of dead and injured, will have been to put the fear into the commuters. Like New York and like all the other major cities, Chicago, where a mass transit system is an arterial network essential to the proper functioning of the city. So in London, this has been the case. And that's what today will have done. But you know, Soledad, the authorities have always said, when it came to the London subway system, it was not a case of if, it was a case of when. And that is why over the last, since 9/11, they have repeatedly prepared, exercised, done demonstrations for exactly this sort of day. Now, if it seems chaotic at times, we're at the tentacles, if you like, Soledad. I'm at the very end, the tentacle of the operation. This is where it happened. But in the control rooms where Dan Rivers was at Scotland Yard, that is where the preparations for exactly this sort of event will have been made and will now be executed. And I don't think we can overemphasize the importance of this confidence question. A lot of people have died. Even more have been injured. The question of what has happened to the confidence of the travelling public and the tourist essential to this economy, that, of course, it will be very much for the future.
Richard, and of course, as one of our analysts pointed out, that is exactly what is at the heart of terror, to strike terror into the hearts of civilians, even more than necessarily killing scores and scores of people. Richard, I'm going to ask you to stick around for a moment because we want to show some videotape that is new into CNN. Apparently, it is off of a camera phone in one of the 3 tube stations that was attacked. Let's take a look if we can. It looks like we're having a little bit of technical difficulties trying to get it rolling, and it's unclear to me exactly what tube station that's from. But let's see if we can fix those technical problems and get back to that in just a moment. We're looking now, though, at... Oh, okay, here we go. We got these pictures. This is inside. You can see one of the tube cars, obviously packed with people. The guess would be that this is videotape, or from the camera phone, rather, transferred to videotape, shortly after the explosion, because it looks as if there is some kind of damage there that we are seeing sort of in the center of the screen. Yes, absolutely. You can see significant damage to that car. We apologize, of course, for the quality of these pictures, but it's pretty remarkable, I think, that somebody is used their capabilities with their camera phone.
You see the glass?
Yeah, you can see the glass. You can also see part of that as well, pieces of metal basically peeled against the wall. It's a little bit difficult to see, but our first glimpse inside the car, you could first, everyone's standing, so obviously this is in the moments after there's been some kind of an explosion.
It's interesting because clearly what you've got is some emergency lighting there. You've got blown out windows. And what you see, at least from this one little glimpse, this is our first glimpse really into what is a scene that could only be described as hell. I don't see panic there. I see an orderly evacuation. Is that your take on it?
I don't know. I think if we heard the audio, we might actually be hearing something, thinking something else. Because some of the eyewitnesses, while they said, and sometimes it was completely calm, at other times people were absolutely panicked. You could see there the windows blown out, and also that other shot where we saw some of the metal kind of twisted back. Difficult to watch because, of course, the quality is so poor. One wouldn't expect anything much better off of a camera phone, and yet it is our first glimpse inside one of these tube carriages where many people had to make their way out. Essentially, one eyewitness said they were trapped like sardines with no emergency officials coming to their aid and no real word. They basically had to burst through either side of the car and then had to make the decision about whether to get out or not, because, of course, they were unclear if the third rail was electrified, and did they survive some kind of explosion only to risk something more out on the rails.
Well, you can imagine how you have to go through your decisions at that point, having to use one of those hammers to get through the window, and then not know if that is relative safety on top of everything else that is going on around you. I suspect we're going to see more pictures like that because in this day and age, there are so many people walking around with the capability of gathering pictures, still pictures, and video. So as the day goes on, we'll share that with you, and it gives you a sense of what was going on underground.
It certainly was the case, I think, after 9/11. The number of people who had their camcorders and the ability to almost immediately share those pictures of where they were. And some of them, of course, inside the building or incredibly close, and then, of course, broadcasting them out to the world. I think we are right. I think we're going to see many more shots like that and get a better sense of exactly what happened inside that double-decker bus and inside those train carriages.
And the interesting thing is, if you think about it, the sad irony of all that is that really does play into the hands of the terrorists, because it does scare people, quite frankly, seeing these pictures. And that is what this is all about. This is anyway, what's been going on in the United States today? Just about every transit system in the United States has been assessing its security, or perhaps lack thereof. The metro system in Washington, if you've been riding on that this morning, you've probably seen bomb-sniffing dogs, officers with automatic weapons. The governor of Massachusetts has raised security on the MBTA, the T in Boston. Mitt Romney, even without specific intelligence, is raising this as a precaution. This is being repeated all throughout the country. And, of course, in Washington, there's particular concern anyway because of many other potential so-called hard targets in addition to the so-called soft targets. CNN's John King has been watching that for us. He joins us from Washington. John?
And, Miles, those steps you just noted being taken around the country, part of the culture, if you will, that we have in this country because of the tragic events of nearly 4 years ago on 9/11. As we watch the investigation and the recovery in London, there are a number of steps being taken by the federal government here in Washington. First and foremost, the Bush administration wants to emphasize this point. Richard Quest was just talking about confidence. The administration says flatly that there is no intelligence at all suggesting any attacks are planned here in the United States. They say the extra precautions you will see. 1 million people a day ride the subway here in Washington. There are bomb-sniffing dogs, as you noted. There are some machine gun armed police officers out on the streets. The administration saying that is all extra vigilance, extra precautions being taken just in case. The Department of Homeland Security Secretary Michael Chertoff just a short time ago saying that the department has asked all law enforcement agencies to have increased vigilance and additional security measures, but again emphasizing no specific credible intelligence at all, Miles. Now, what will happen in a case like this, because because of the experience of 9/11, as those security alerts will go out, people will increase vigilance around the country, and they will look proactively, if you will, to protect people during the coming rush hours in cities in the United States, just in case. Another thing we're told they are doing is going back. Now that you have had this attack in London, go back over the intelligence brought in over the last several days and several weeks and see if there's anything in that material that perhaps has more relevance now that you see what has happened in London. As you noted at the top of the hour, U.S. officials saying in their communications with British officials, they are being told the death toll is now about 40, that several hundred people have been injured. They say they will do anything they can do to help with the investigation there. They obviously believe this is a terrorist attack linked to the start of that G8 summit in London. For the most part, Miles, putting people on a bit of higher alert, trying to gather all the intelligence they can, coordinate between and among all the federal, state, and local agencies that would have a piece in this. President Bush has been in touch with his national security team from the G8 summit in Scotland. Again, they're emphasizing they see no cause of concern here in the United States, but certainly when you have an event like this, what they believe to be a carefully coordinated terrorist attack, very similar, they say, to that attack on the Madrid train not all that long ago, they certainly want to be extra cautious here in the States, Miles, and that's what they say they're doing.
Well, you know, and that Madrid attack, you would think, would have changed a lot of the thinking about how to handle security in and around these transit systems. First of all, let's look at some pictures that we've got this morning from one of the metro stations there. John, you know, to respond like this afterward is all well and good, and we certainly wouldn't want to doubt the prudence of reacting in this way. But the question remains, we've been talking to our analysts all morning about this, is by their very nature, these transit systems are sitting ducks.
Yes, they are. Sitting ducks is an appropriate term for it. Remember back in the days just after 9/11, Vice President Dick Cheney called this the new normal, and he said the country was going to have to decide how much of its freedom it was willing to give up to deal with the terrorist threat. And he has said this would be an evolving process, and it certainly has been over the past nearly 4 years now. And one of the questions everyone has raised, is it worth the psychological, will Americans pay the psychological price of seeing security every time they get on the subway, every time they go to a baseball game or a basketball game? How much can governments afford without hurting the economy to put into the billions already spent to increase security at airports, to increase security at ports? Many mayors would tell you around the country port security still a major problem in this country, but those are the softer, they're not the softest targets, but the softer targets, not the Pentagon, not the Capitol building, not the White House, but subway stations, major sporting events. Those are the softer targets that officials say Al-Qaeda and affiliated and like-minded terrorist groups are likely to attack now, because so much has been done around the government institutions and installations that you look for a place where you can get a large group of people and where you can cause panic.
Now, while you've been speaking, John, the right part of your screen at home, that is the scene of what is to be a police news conference from Scotland Yard. It was supposed to happen about 15 minutes ago. The minute it starts, we're going to go to it. John, in spite of all of this, in spite of what you just said, the national threat level hasn't been changed. Why not?
It has not been changed, and as you well know, Miles, that threat level has been criticized from time to time, that Washington would go, say, currently at yellow to a higher level, which would be orange. The highest level is red. That level has been criticized by some who say, what does it mean? What specific steps? Because every time they raise it or lower it, they say Americans should still be vigilant. They're constantly assessing that threat level, and we've been told, a number of our reporters and producers, including myself, have been told by officials that because there is no credible specific intelligence at all suggesting a threat of attacks here in the United States, that at the moment there is no consideration to raise that, no plan to raise that threat level. But it is assessed every day, regardless of what we saw happening in London today. It would have been assessed every day anyway, several times throughout the day. And officials say as they pour back through old intelligence to double check it to see if there's anything relevant, and as they take in new intelligence, if need be, they would raise it. But they say now, based on several hours of reporting today as we watch the events in London unfold, they see absolutely no reason to do that on a national level. Instead, they're taking what has become a much more common approach. Incremental increases in security and vigilance are in the places like New York City and Washington, D.C., and in the areas, specifically mass transit, subway stations. The Amtrak has also increased security, places that they believe could possibly be a target.
Seems as if the national threat level has become a bit outmoded, John King, and we can talk about that another time. John King, our national correspondent in Washington, thank you very much. Soledad.
Well, while we await that press conference out of London by the Metropolitan Police, let's bring you a couple of details that we are getting here. We're told by the Associated Press reporting that some of the buses, and eyewitness accounts verify this as well, some of the buses, the double-decker buses, had to be used as ambulances. They were in fact packed with injured people to transport them in bulk to the hospitals because it was impossible to get some of the ambulances through. In addition to that, at the scene of several blasts, we are told special emergency workers in orange biochemical suits have been searching for evidence of any biochemical, biological, or nuclear agents. And the bus that was torn apart, this from some eyewitnesses, the mangled upper deck, and you've seen that in some of the pictures, was open, and debris from that bus littered all around the streets there. In addition to that, they described that one side of the building that was near to the bus, and you're looking at pictures right now of that, scarred by shrapnel, blackened by the explosion when that bus blew up. That's some of the details that we're hearing. We just heard from John King, who's watching a reaction in Washington, D.C. as far as national safety and national security. Let's get to Kelly Wallace now. She's got an eye on what's happening around the rest of the country as well. Kelly, good morning again.
Good morning again, Soledad. Just as you and Miles have been talking, just about every mass transportation system in the United States taking a look at its security. Big picture here, we can tell you Amtrak, which pretty much operates in nearly every state in the United States, deciding to increase its security level. In a statement, Amtrak officials say they are doing this as a precaution, that there is no direct or specific threat against Amtrak. But part of this increased security will include more resources on trains, as well as canine teams going across the trains, and also alerting passengers and employees to be on the lookout for any suspicious activity and any suspicious packages. Of course, here in New York City, especially in light of September 11th, a lot of concern about security. Something new we can tell you, a spokesman with the New York Police Department telling CNN that police have increased security at, quote, United Kingdom-related locations, not elaborating on what those locations are. Also, no surprise, extra police presence, extra officers in the subway system and also along bus systems around the city. We do know that there was a search drill conducted by the New York City Police Department earlier this morning. New York City officials saying this was not in response to any threat, but of course, trying to take every precaution possible. As well, New Jersey Transit, which hundreds and thousands of people use to get in and out of Manhattan to commute to their jobs. We are told New Jersey Transit reminding customers as well to be on the lookout for any suspicious activity, any suspicious packages. Officials there telling us that New Jersey Transit has been on heightened alert, on this state of alert, since September 11th and the Madrid bombings. Also around the country, in Chicago, we are told that there is a increased security with increased police patrols in the mass transit system and also in the central business district. This coming from an official with the mayor's office. You can see that increased police presence throughout the city. And then on the West Coast, we understand that there was to be, and there might be going on as we speak, in fact, a news conference in Los Angeles at around 10 a.m. Eastern. The mayor, the police chief, the county sheriff to talk about how they have activated what they call a special command center and talking about extra security measures they are taking. Our colleagues here throughout CNN Soledad talking to cities all across the country. Atlanta increased security as well on that transit system in that city. Dallas officials saying that they are evaluating security measures, but no plans to increase security at this point. Soledad, I can tell you, people here definitely a little jittery, of course, especially as we had the morning commute here just hours after what happened in London. And again, police presence throughout this city and throughout most cities, especially in the mass transit system.
Kelly, we should note that we're just a couple of minutes away from hearing from the Metropolitan Police in London. They're going to give us an update on, we're expecting some of the numbers of dead and wounded in the wake of the simultaneous coordinated, it appears, attacks in the London Underground and also on the bus system as well. Kelly, if you're still around, you know, while you were talking, we were taking a picture of Penn Station, and actually, as much as Amtrak has said that it's made some changes, the truth is is, from the exterior right there, it looks pretty normal. It doesn't look like you see significant changes in what's happening in Amtrak. Also, while you were talking about other cities around the country, we'd see some police officers kind of wandering through, or in the case of the Chicago police, a police car driving by. But you don't get the sense of overwhelming presence. Is that kind of part of it, not to overwhelm at this point, considering there's no specific attacks threatened against the United States?
Excellent point that you raised. That does appear to be the sense of this, because again, every location that we talk to says no specific or credible threat against Amtrak, against any city in the United States. And so therefore, there is what we talk about here, always this balancing act, really, for officials throughout the United States and elsewhere in terms of responding to an attack elsewhere. They have no intelligence that such an attack is imminent or planned here in the United States. They want to respond, but they also want people to continue to go about their normal business. And Soledad, really, especially in New York and Washington, both cities really on a heightened state of alert, you can say, since September 11th. So there's a lot of security that is going on, that has been going on and in place since those attacks, things that you and I might not see going on every day.
Excellent point, I think. You know, Kelly, let me just interrupt you there as we show people pictures that were a moment ago on your right, now on my right, of the scene where we're expecting to hear from the Metropolitan Police in London about any advances that they have made in the investigation to this point. We're seeing a little bit of activity, and that gives us a sense that things are imminent. We're going to be hearing from the spokespeople in just a few moments. Kelly, why don't you and I continue our discussions? You know, I have to say, with the understanding that I might break away any moment as soon as we hear from someone coming out there on the podium, you know, it was a little bit unnerving to hear the President of the United States and the brief remarks that he made from Scotland, where he's attending the G8 summit, essentially advising commuters, Americans today, will be extra vigilant as you head into the office. I have to say, as someone who was already at work, it was quite unnerving.
It certainly is, and obviously to passengers and people who are using mass transit systems in New York and Washington and throughout the country. This is how most of us get to our jobs each and every day. There's no way around it. You need to use the subway, you need to use the bus. So there is a sense, I think John King referred to this, what Vice President Cheney and others have referred to as the new normal. And some of this is what people in the United States and elsewhere around the world know can happen. And there has been discussion about how vulnerable our mass transit systems could be. You have large pockets of people on subways and on buses, and obviously a great deal of concern about what could happen if explosions were underway. And so there will be a lot of discussions, no doubt, as there always are after cases like this, Soledad, about what steps are being taken in New York, in Dallas, in Atlanta, in Los Angeles, not necessarily in response, but to make sure that something like this doesn't happen. Again, though, you raised the question, I think you even talked about it earlier with an analyst, how can you ultimately protect everyone in terms of getting on buses or getting on subways?
And we'll see if we hear an answer, as we are seeing representatives from the Metropolitan Police Department in London take the stage essentially there as they are about to address reporters and others who are assembled to hear the very latest in this investigation. Kelly, thanks. Let's listen in.
Brian Paddock will open proceedings. He will give you a brief update of the position. We will then hand over to representatives from the other emergency services, London Underground and Transport for London. At the end of this briefing, there will be an opportunity to take one-to-one questions, and there are opportunities afterwards for one-to-one interviews with the speakers. Thank you.
Good afternoon. The first thing to say is that the Police Casualty Bureau is now open for friends and relatives who are concerned about those who may have been killed or injured in the incidents today. The telephone number is 0870 1566 344. 0870 1566 344. In terms of what exactly happened this morning, at 8:51 this morning there was an incident at Moorgate, around Moorgate, Liverpool Street, Moorgate East underground stations. Confirmed explosion 100 yards into the tunnel from Liverpool Street station. It was believed that the train involved is either a central or a circle line train, and there are 7 confirmed fatalities in that incident. At 8:56 this morning, at the King's Cross Russell Square incident. Again, 21 confirmed fatalities in that particular incident. At 9:17, there was an explosion on a train coming into Edgware Road Underground Station, which blew a hole through a wall onto another train in an adjoining platform. In fact, it's believed that 3 trains were involved in that particular incident, and so far there are 5 fatalities in that particular incident. And then at 9:47, there was an explosion on a bus at Upper Woburn Square junction with Tavistock Place. There are fatalities in that incident, but at the moment we cannot confirm the numbers. So 4 devices, we believe, are involved in today's incidents. The police service received no warning about these attacks, and the police service has received no claims of responsibility from any group in connection with these attacks. This clearly was a callous attack on purely innocent members of the public, deliberately designed to kill and injure innocent members of the public. That's all I have to say at this stage, but I can answer questions afterwards.
Obviously, London's transport is facing some very challenging times at the moment. The Underground won't be in action until tomorrow. The bus services, we hope, will come back on in central London later on this afternoon. And the overground stations, King's Cross, will be closed. Liverpool Street is currently closed, and Victoria is closed due to a bomb threat. We hope that will be open quite soon. The situation is fluid. There are a number of bomb scares, as one can understand at a time like this. But we're doing our very best with Network Rail and the other operators to open up the systems as best we can. And we'd like Londoners to start thinking about their journey home and to make sure they check whether the services are available and then to start to make their way home. Obviously, we don't want a great rush out of central London, but it's going to be a very difficult evening to get people away. But I know that everyone will be working together to try and get people home as best we can. So our encouragement is to check on those systems and then for people to start to make their way home as reasonably as soon as possible, without a great rush all going off at the same time from offices. So we'd ask people to think carefully about their journey back tonight.
The London Ambulance Service has been working alongside other emergency services throughout today to respond to the explosions across London. We have been assisting with the rescue effort and assessing and treating at all scenes to ensure that the patients receive the medical attention they require. We have treated 45 patients with serious or critical injuries, including burns, amputations, chest and blast injuries, and fractured limbs. We have also treated approximately 300 patients with minor injuries, including lacerations, smoke inhalation, shock, cuts, and bruises. Patients with life-threatening or serious injuries were stabilised at the scene before being taken to hospital by ambulance staff from London Ambulance Service and other neighbouring ambulance services. Patients with minor injuries have been treated at the scene and, where needed, taken to hospital by non-emergency medical staff, voluntary aid ambulances, and indeed public buses. Hospitals who have received casualties include the Royal London Hospital in Whitechapel, University College Hospital, St Mary's Hospital in Paddington, and the Royal Free Hospital. Over 100 ambulance vehicles and more than 250 ambulance staff have attended the incident scenes, supported by staff in our control room. Over the course of this incident, many hundreds of calls were received by our control room staff. We are asking members of the public not to dial 999 unless they require treatment for life-threatening injuries at this time. Can we also ask that people do not go to their A&E departments at hospitals in central London unless absolutely necessary, so that those departments can continue to focus their efforts on treating casualties from this morning's incidents? Thank you.
The London Fire Brigade was able to receive the call at our regional control centre and respond quickly and effectively to the tragic events that unfolded in London today. These were, of course, the kind of events that London firefighters have been planning, training and equipping for, and today came the reality. Obviously, firefighters and the other emergency service workers witnessed some very harrowing scenes today, and they performed magnificently in the face of that challenge. Certainly, we would like to offer our condolences to all of those that have injured or lost loved ones. We still have firefighters at the scenes and are still assisting in the work they have to do, and we will be there as long as it takes and needs to be there. We attended with some 40 fire engines and specialist equipment designed just for this purpose, together with over 200 firefighters today in London.
These were my passengers. Let me tell you, all of us send our condolences out to their families and all those who were involved in this. When we, as the situation unfolded, we felt we had to shut down the system and remove people from the trains because we didn't know how many more incidents there might be. The staff performed magnificently. Of course, my staff had to deal with this in the 10, 15, 20 minutes before others could be there, and the reports I've gotten have indicated that the intense pride I should feel about them. They've done a fantastic job. They did a very difficult job, and they did it well. We are now in the process of getting clearance from the police to getting out on the property to inspect all of the trains. Once the trains are inspected, we will try to get drivers to them and move them to depots so that they can be secured. Our ambition is to have a service for the morning. If we can, we will run some service late tonight on unaffected lines, such as the Jubilee, the Northern, and the Victoria, but it is unclear. It will all depend on whether we have the crews. Even when we start up tomorrow, though, keep in mind where these incidents occurred, which will no doubt be held as crime scenes for some time. We will not be able to run any service on the top side of the circle. So that means it's likely the H&C service will be out. Certainly there will be no Circle Line service. We won't be able to run the Met past Baker Street, assuming we can get into Baker Street, and it will be, at best, a shuttle service on either end of the Piccadilly line. But we hope to run a full service everywhere else, and we're going to get this system up and running as quick as possible. Thank you.
On behalf of the Mayor, the Commissioner of Transport for London, and the whole of us at Transport for London, we send our condolences to everybody affected, and I send my thanks to the bus staff who've responded very well today. When the first incidents occurred on the Underground this morning, we opened the bus service to all tube passengers, but then, of course, a little later, we were advised by the police to withdraw the bus service out of Zone 1 substantially, which was done. The bus service is just starting to return to Zone 1. It will take some time to get back to normal, and as it gets back to normal, additional police officers, wardens and bus staff will be out to help at major points like Oxford Street and so forth for the evening rush hour. Clearly the bus service can't serve areas where the emergency services cordons are still there, and particularly in the sort of King's Cross, the Aldgate areas and around Russell Square, we will have to either institute diversions or curtailments, and we'll attempt to get details of those out as soon as we can. The bus service can cope with an awful lot of extra people, but it will be slow to get home. As Andy Trotter said, we would like people to stagger their homeward journeys because we clearly can't cope with everybody who would normally start off between 5 and 6 this evening. We will try to, as hard as we can, and we'd ask travellers in London to bear with us. and to bear with our staff, who I know will rise to the occasion. Buses in London are currently being searched regularly and certainly at each end of the journey, and that will continue until further notice. I should also say that the Docklands Light Railway is resuming, that on the roads we have had messages up since early this morning asking people not to come to central London. They will be in place for the rest of the day, and the congestion charge was suspended this morning for the day. Thank you.
Clearly, we are very concerned about those who've been killed and injured, and we are very concerned about the impact that this is having on families and friends. I have to say that since this conference started, unfortunately, the Police Casualty Bureau has developed a technical fault, and we would ask people to be patient with us while we try to rectify that fault.
Okay. We will take questions now from the floor. Could you please raise your hand, identify where you're from and who the question is directed at? Thanks very much.
At the moment, we don't know whether or not this was suicide bombers or whether this was simply packages left on the bus and in the underground stations. It's too early to say. Again, there is no indication that these were anything other than conventional explosive, but other than that, we don't have any information about the size or type of device that was used.
Have you started going through the code from CCTV cameras? And if not, when will you be doing that?
Clearly, we've had considerable success in the past using closed-circuit television footage in order to trace the movements of the people involved. That will be one of our first priorities, as well as securing whatever forensic evidence we can secure from the various scenes.
Question in the middle.
Can you tell us whether you've had made any arrests throughout the course of this morning in connection with this at all?
I don't have any information at this stage of any arrests having been made in connection with these incidents.
Question for the London Underground. Are there any people still trapped underground?
No. The system is clear.
And when were they last? How long did it take to evacuate people?
Well, the entire system, almost all of the system was cleared within the first hour or two, but the people on the Piccadilly line train, it took the longest to get them clear. There was difficulty getting access to all of them. I don't have an exact time when we got the last person off.
Do we have any estimate how many people died on the bus?
We don't have any information at the moment as to, we know that there were some fatalities, but we don't have any numbers at the moment.
Question at the front.
Penny Marshall, ITV News. Can you tell us at this stage how many members of the anti-terrorist squad are involved in the investigation and what they're doing, why they're not here?
Members of the anti-terrorist branch are fully involved investigating these incidents. That's why they're not here. I'm the spokesperson for them as well as the rest of the Metropolitan Police Service. Their time is much more valuably spent investigating these incidents. We're not prepared to discuss how many detectives are involved in the investigation at this stage.
Question there.
Stuart Tendler from The Times. Should the security level have been higher today, given that it was the launch of G8?
The security level in London has been high over recent months. We have had all the security services actively engaged in anti-terrorism activity during this period. We have given advice and we have received cooperation from the transport services around raising people's awareness of the possibility of suspect devices, and so we are content that the security level was appropriate even notwithstanding the fact that G8 is happening in Scotland.
Question there.
Sean Reagan, Sunday Telegraph. The security level was actually lowered within the last month to its lowest level since 2001. Can you comment on that?
The security level was lowered slightly from the very highest, other than having specific information about a specific target. It is at its second highest level, and we felt that that was appropriate in all the circumstances, bearing in mind all the intelligence that we were in possession of.
We're not going to start getting into risks, threats or anything like that today. This is about actually telling you about the response to the operation. So I would appreciate if you could confine those questions to the response to the operation from the emergency services rather than the investigation stage. Thank you.
How many police officers have been involved on the ground in this morning's response, and are you recalling any officers from the G8 summit to help deal with this?
We've got about 1,500 Metropolitan Police officers deployed to Scotland. We have 31,000 police officers in London. We have more than enough police officers to cope with this sort of emergency. At this stage, we have used officers who were on duty during the course of these incidents, and we have not called officers in who were off duty before, because clearly this is going to take some time in order to restore London to normality, and clearly we have to bear in mind that we're going to have to bear in mind resilience in terms of keeping the policing going during this period. In terms of exact numbers, we haven't had a head count.
Simon.
Sorry, the British Transport Police obviously attended these calls when they first came out, and it has put a great strain upon us, without a doubt. We have a number of officers in Scotland as well for G8. We won't be bringing any back from there, but we will be bringing in as many officers as we can on duty in order to cope with the pressures we're going to face for the rest of today and into tomorrow.
Simon.
Andy Trotter and Brian Paddick, can I ask, what is your reaction basically to the fact that the nightmare scenario has happened? And what does that say about the counter-terrorism measures that have up to now been deployed?
Well, both the current Commissioner, Sir Ian Blair, and the previous Commissioner have said that London has always been a terrorist target. And we are clearly shocked by what has happened today, but we're not surprised at what's happened. We have worked over recent months and years with British Transport Police, with the City of London Police, with London Ambulance Service, and with the London Fire Brigade and all the other emergency services, rehearsing and planning for exactly this sort of scenario. And so, right from the word go, we were able to implement this well-rehearsed, well-planned incident response. And as far as the Metropolitan Police Service is concerned, that plan has worked exactly as it should have done.
I mean, very sadly, all the practice that we put in, all the London forces together, plus the other emergency services, the plans that we've worked on so hard were required today. And as far as that response is concerned, the response worked extremely well. But it's a very sad day that we've had to actually bring this into play.
Question at the end.
Sally Jones, Dow Jones Newswire. A question for DC Paddick. Are you still looking for devices? Can you confirm this?
Clearly, we want to make sure that the transport system is safe, but otherwise we don't have any intelligence that there is a threat from other devices. So, in the absence of any specific intelligence, we are nonetheless being very vigilant, as our colleagues have said from Transport for London, to make sure that buses and underground trains are searched before they're brought back into service.
Question there.
Jean Whalen with the Wall Street Journal. I just wonder, were there any power surges then, or what was that about this morning? The reports that there were power surges in the tube?
I think Tim O'Toole can answer that question.
There were not power surges, but what happens is when you have an incident of this magnitude, its first manifestation is in the control rooms of the power, because the first thing that happens is the traction current is shut off. When there was the read that there was power withdrawn at different places on the network, the assumption was by some people that there must have been a surge to cause so many breakers to trip out. Further information quickly came in that there was a derailed train at Edgware Road, and then speculation occurred that somehow that must have come in contact with the major power cable, and did that have an impact? And then the rumors just kept running. But there was never any power surge, and indeed, the traction current network to the underground is completely intact right now, and we could run a full service were it not for these criminal scenes.
I will get for as many questions as possible. One in the front row.
Andy Gardner, Sunday Mirror. Tim, 27 minutes between the first blast on the tube and the last blast. I know it was chaotic, but did you issue any warnings to your drivers?
It happened almost, our read was that it all happened within 3 minutes of each other. We didn't really have time. That was the report we had in the Network Communication Center where we were.
John.
Two-part question. In broad terms,
Could I just further? Sorry. And once we had perception of what was going on, we immediately went to a code amber, which was to move all trains into platforms where we could, so that while we got a read on what was happening, we had a way to get people out with the least difficulty, so we wouldn't have to walk people through tunnels.
John Steele from the Daily Telegraph. Mr. Paddock, probably most appropriately. Two parts. Can you just say, is Scotland Yard treating this as a suspected Islamic extremist terrorist attack? And the second part is, can we have a little bit more detail about the location of the Piccadilly line train, which direction it was going in, i.e. where was it between the stations, and also where was the Edgware train coming from? A little bit more detail on that.
The first thing I would say is that, as far as I'm concerned, Islamic and terrorism are two words that do not go together. There may be people who present themselves as Muslims who carry out these acts, but it is totally against what I understand to be the Islamic faith and what Muslims generally stand for. And anybody who professes to be a terrorist and somebody who believes in Islam, I think is sadly mistaken. However, we are treating this as a terrorist incident. We are keeping an open mind as to who the perpetrators might be. We have received no claim in terms of who is responsible. And so at this stage, we wouldn't speculate.
Tim, can you answer the questions about where the trains were?
The Piccadilly line train was between King's Cross and Russell Square. The Edgware Road train was a Circle Line train. In fact, both incidents on the subsurface railway were Circle Line trains, and it was between Edgware Road and Paddington.
Okay, question there, please.
Rod Northern from Newsweek. For Russell Smith, is there any indication that any of the casualties were caused by other than the explosions themselves, for instance, in the evacuation or subsequently?
It's early days to be able to answer that, but we don't have any evidence to suggest that at this stage, no.
Question at the front.
Tell me, the rumours that a police sniper shot dead a suicide bomber at Canary Wharf, do you know anything about that?
We have no reports of any police sniper shooting dead anybody today.
Also, a group called Al Qaeda Europe have been claiming responsibility. Are you taking that seriously on their website?
We understand that a group that are claiming to be linked to Al Qaeda have claimed responsibility on the internet. We will be looking at that as well as any other leads, but at the moment we don't know whether that's a genuine claim or not.
Question at the back. Yeah, in the middle. Can I ask Ken Knight if we could get some more detail on the rescue operation, please?
Yes, certainly. The fire crews were, of course, deployed in normal rescue mode. Weren't sure, of course, at first whether there was also fire involved, so were equipped to deal with fire in the underground. The planning that Tim O'Toole talked about of moving all other parts of the underground to their home stations helped immensely with evacuation. In the event there was no fire, no firefighting, but we deployed crews in breathing apparatus to undertake rescues, because it was not only extremely difficult conditions, but a great deal of dust and dirt had been thrown up, of course, by this terrorist activity, and they were deployed with the other emergency services. The crews there worked exactly according to plan. I'm very proud of what they were able to do today. and I think we still have something like 20 fire appliances at the scenes, but I'm content now that we are now equipped and prepared and continue to be equipped and prepared, and from this experience we'll maintain a high level of vigilance in the event of such atrocity.
Question front.
Dr. Crichton, Sunday Herald for DAC Paddock. Could you clear up this question of a warning? AP are quoting an official from the Israeli embassy in London saying that they received a warning from Scotland Yard a couple of minutes before an explosion, and as a result some of their government officials didn't go to a conference in London. Was there no warning or no intelligence at all?
The information I have at the moment is that there were no warnings given to the police at all.
And any intelligence? That something might happen today?
But the information I have at the moment is that there was no intelligence in our possession that these attacks were going to take place today, and we were given no warning by any organisation that this was going to happen.
How quickly then were other embassies of foreign governments alerted to the situation?
I'm not in possession of that information.
Okay, Stuart again.
Question to Mr. O'Toole. Can you say how many trains were affected by this incident this morning? Estimated how many passengers had to be decanted from the system?
Well, I don't have an exact count, but during the rush hour we would be running usually around 500 trains. We move 3 million people a day. So it would be a very large number at that time of the morning. These trains probably had, the Circle Line trains probably each had around 700 people on them. The Piccadilly Line train probably had something like 900 at that time of the morning, but I don't have an exact count for obvious reasons.
Andrea.
Yeah, hi, Andrea Perry from the Sunday Express. This is for Tim O'Toole as well. It's 2 parts actually. How many people are actually trapped underground? Have you got a figure?
Well, as I said, I was quite proud of the staff in that people were not trapped. It was about a controlled move of getting people off. There was a difficulty getting people off of the Piccadilly Line train. It was the only deep tube level train affected. The other 2 were subsurface trains, of course. And I don't have an exact number for how long people were stuck there.
All right, we've been listening to a news conference, lots of information to go through here as officials there in London from the various organizations involved in this, police, fire, ambulance service, the Underground, the Transportation Authority, confirming, first of all, 33 fatalities in all, 7 on one station near Moorgate Station, 21 at Liverpool Street, 5 dead at Edgware Road, and then an unconfirmed number of fatalities on that bus explosion. Don't know what the number is there. 45 critically or seriously injured people treated with the kinds of injuries you would suspect: burns, amputations, chest and blast injuries, and fractured limbs. Total injured treated by more than 100 ambulances with a staff of 250, about 345 people. They're efforting right now trying to get the system back up and running. The Underground will not be back at least until tomorrow. Buses will begin later in the day. As far as the investigation goes, officials there saying there were no advance warning of these attacks and they have no verifiable claim. We've been reporting to you one Islamist website laying claim for this, but no way to validate that, and the authorities there not indicating whether that is genuine or not casting any judgment on that particular claim. No information on arrests, knocked down a few rumors for us about power surges, no power surges, and the fact that it was possible that one suspect, perhaps a suicide bomber, was shot by a sniper. One thing that was interesting, they talked about how they had rehearsed for a scenario like this many, many times, and they were able to execute that scenario really from the get-go, and that probably, safe to say, helped a lot in this situation. As another official put it, though, very sad that we had to implement that plan. Soledad.
Yeah, I think the word he used was actually shocked but not surprised, which I think kind of takes us back to Bill Daley, and thank you again for sticking around with us all morning. Shocked but not surprised means we've all been waiting for something like this to happen, and I get the sense they were not talking about the IRA.
No, I believe they've been thinking for a while, much like us here in the United States, that these soft targets, these places where people go to and from work, where they go to go visiting, if people sightseeing might travel around, are the soft places that could be targets. And so they've been planning for a long time in this response. Certainly this is the back end of what goes into preparing for security. They've had certain levels of security, similar to what we've had here, kind of levels and codes. They've had a very proactive plan over there because they've had problems with the IRA.
So does that mean then the plan failed, or does that mean that the plan succeeded because the plan was actually what you would do should there be an attack?
Well, I think their plan succeeded in their response plan. I think the preventative plan it can never be 100%, and I think we've certainly learned a lot from these incidents and can take it back here to the U.S. and look at how it might impact our transit systems. But you know, Soledad, it's also interesting is that before we get into the final stages of an event like this, where security, whether it have to be armed people on a platform or people being vigilant, are involved, really the intelligence, this really points out to the early stages, to really get to these sites, to get to these cells, to these people who are operatives early on, to prevent it before it becomes manifest. Really, our last chance to catch them is when they're going down into a subway tunnel or into a bus station or on a bus to commit one of these acts.
What did you make of this timeline, as we heard from, I think it was Brian Paddock, one of the police commissioners, said 8:51, the first explosion, and it happened about 100 yards into the tunnel. Then 8:56, King's Cross has that explosion. 21 people confirmed dead there. 9:17, another train in transit, again, explodes in the tunnel. 5 fatalities there. And then about 30 minutes after that, you've got the explosion on the bus. So if you do the math, it's 26 minutes from when the first train had an explosion. The last train explosion took place, which is a fair amount of time, and also kind of jives with what the eyewitnesses were saying about being trapped for 20 or 30 minutes inside these trains, unable to get anybody to help them. Does that number, 26 minutes, seem like a lot of time to you, or a little time before? We heard a moment ago from the man in charge of the mass transit or the trains that he never got word after the first explosion. It seemed just like minutes, he said. And there was no word in that what was actually 26 minutes to stop the other trains.
Yeah, exactly. 26 minutes in the world of transportation and moving hundreds of thousands of people around, and as he mentioned, maybe 500 trains at any one time who are in this underground system, is not a lot of time. And it's not a lot of time to be able to understand what's going on, understand what might be, as they thought, maybe early on, a power surge to a real incident, and be able to send out communications. So to me, it indicates that this plan was very closely coordinated, was elaborate in the sense that pre-planning went into it, and perhaps planning to the point at which they were able to detonate an explosive device 100 yards into a tunnel, which is even more scarier to everyone than if it was above ground.
Some interesting details, I thought, actually, in that timeline. The 9:17 explosion, the train that was coming into the Edgware station, they said it blew into an adjacent train, and in all, it was 3 trains that were involved. So what does that tell you about the kind of device that was used and the power of that device?
Well, certainly in an enclosed area, such as a tunnel where the blast is contained, it can push out in directions that it wouldn't have if it was up on a street where there would be no resistance. But because it's contained, it has much more impact. Also, the fact whether it's by design or was just by their coincidence that 3 trains happened to be running parallel to each other and were involved is yet to be determined. But certainly for the terrorist, that planning certainly resulted in a number of injuries, maybe more than would have resulted if it was just in one train.
Well, unfortunately, sort of good news for the terrorist perspective and terrible news for those who have injured. Absolutely. As we mentioned, 33 people now confirmed dead, and that's not even counting the number who killed in that double-decker bus. They're not even hazarding at this point a guess at the number killed. Anything surprise you in that press conference?
Well, just one point you mentioned about the double-decker bus is that if you look at the timeline, that was significantly after the explosions underground. Now, whether the thought there is that people would have gone to the surface transportation or whether it was some other type of delay is yet to be determined. But it's interesting that was a good period of time, I think close to maybe even 45 minutes or so before that occurred.
Well, all right. Bill Daley, again, we're going to ask you, we thank you, but we're going to ask you to continue to stick around with us this morning as we get more information coming to us out of London this morning.
We're keeping our focus on London, of course. Our reporters are there, and we're keeping you abreast of all the developments as they come in. CNN International, Christiane Amanpour, Nick Robertson helping us out with that. But in the meantime, a domestic story we can't overlook. We just got word from our weather department that Hurricane Dennis is now strengthening and continues to make its way toward Florida. Hurricane watch for the Florida Keys and Florida Bay. Tropical storm watch for the entire southern peninsula of Florida exists right now. So we're watching that. We'll keep you posted on that as well. In addition to all of our
because, of course, that's the area that has been hit before, and not much time has gone past since they've been recovering from their hurricane damage.
Really, many people do not even have their roofs on yet from the previous year, and they're having to contend with this. To recap for you where we are right now, top of the hour right now. It's been a long morning for us. It's been a long day in London. We just heard from officials as they gave us some pretty definitive word as to what happened, much clearer picture of what went on. A total now of 33 confirmed fatalities in the underground explosions in London this morning, right at the peak of the rush hour. An undetermined number of fatalities related to a bus which exploded on the surface right around the same time frame. 345 people injured, 45 of them very seriously, and are being treated in hospitals. Some of the people injured were treated right there on the scene by the ambulance corps. At least 100 ambulances responded. Police are saying that they had no advance warning of these attacks, and they say they have no official claim of responsibility that they consider to be genuine. Of course, we've been telling you about a report that we got from a website, which we is pretty. It's hard to say how valid it is, but an organization calling itself the Secret Organization Group of Al-Qaeda of Jihad in Europe, with a statement which sort of matches the language and syntax of these kinds of statements, laying claim for this attack, which occurred this morning. 4 separate explosions, and 3 of them underground, 1 of them above the surface. And unclear at this point, still don't have a good sense as to whether this was in fact a suicide attack or these were somehow remotely detonated bombs with timers, perhaps. Crowded train. Some of these trains, as we heard, had 700, 900 people jammed in. It's certainly conceivable somebody could have gotten on, left a backpack, gotten off at the next step, and perhaps left something with a timer. CNN's Malika Kapoor is outside one of the stations that was affected right now, and she joins us with more. Malika.
Hi there. Yes, you're right. I'm just a couple of feet in front of the Edgware Road tube station, and this is one of the tube stations where the blast occurred earlier this morning. Just a short time ago, we did hear from the superintendent of the Metropolitan Police. He came out here and issued a brief statement. He did confirm that there have been a number of casualties here. He said they've had seen a number of walking wounded, and he also did confirm that there have been a number of fatalities at this train station. At that moment, he did not tell us how many fatalities there were, but we have since heard that there have been 5 fatalities in this area at the Edgware Road tube station. Now, earlier I did manage to speak to somebody who was on the train when the blast took place. He was traveling in the first carriage of the train, and he said he just about 10 seconds into the train journey, he heard a very loud noise, and that noise came from the second carriage. And he said in a moment, everything went dark. The train was completely dark. Everything was blacked out. He said initially there was a lot of panic in the train carriage that he was in, but in a few minutes, in his words, he said once people realized they had all their limbs, people calmed down a little bit, but there was still a lot of shock, a lot of disbelief in the carriage, people looking at each other and saying, what happened? And they sat there in complete darkness for 5 to 10 minutes till somebody got up and kicked one of the train doors out. And they had to sit there in silence, in the darkness, waiting for a while. He said they tried hard not to take too many deep breaths, trying not to inhale too much soot. And they had to wait a couple of minutes till the rescue squads came. And they had to walk out of the train station by walking backwards along the tunnel. And when he walked back along the tunnel, he did manage to see the second carriage where the explosion took place, and he said the carriage had been completely ripped apart.
Malika, I'm curious a little bit about the scene behind you. When last we spoke to Richard Quest, who is not far from where you are, it looked as if the streets were pretty vacant in central London. It looks like people are returning there. Are these people who are making their way home, and are they having difficulty?
Well, you're absolutely right. Just the roads have been opened up. The main Edgware Road was closed. It was blocked off to traffic till just about an hour ago. We ourselves couldn't come this close to the Edgware Road tube station, but the police have removed the police lines just about an hour ago, and traffic has resumed. We are seeing traffic flowing freely on Edgware Road. Looks like traffic is moving. People are getting back to business now, but there is still a lot of shock, a lot of disbelief. People walking past here asking each other, did you hear anything? Did you see anything? We've also had one of the early editions of the evening newspapers come out now, and people are stopping to buy that, and it is what everyone is talking about here in London this afternoon.
To say the least, what we're all talking about today. Malika Kapoor out in front of the Edgware station, where a total of 3 trains were affected by an explosion causing at least 5 fatalities. Soledad.
We have been working, of course, with our colleagues at CNN International to provide you full coverage of what is happening, not only here, the impact here in the U.S., but obviously, more importantly, what is going on in London. The information that has come out of that press conference held by the Metropolitan Police not very long ago, and also the various statements coming not only from President Bush, but the Prime Minister, Tony Blair, who is now in London, has come back for his face-to-face meetings that he says he needs to have with his security team, Scotland Yard, in addition to others as well. Christiane Amanpour is in London. Let's get right to her. She's updating us on what came out of this press conference with the Metropolitan Police.
Smoke inhalation, as well as shock and cuts and bruises. 4 hospitals around London have taken the casualties in. Over 100 ambulances, 250 ambulance staff, as well as 250 or so fire brigade staff, as well as all the police. Now, one thing that is likely to cause some speculation, no doubt, in the days to come is the level of police security in London. There had been talk about some of the security being reduced because many police were sent up to Glen Eagles for the G8 summit. However, the police spokesman said that 1,500 Metropolitan Police officers have gone to Scotland, where there are 31,000 here in London. However, he did say something interesting in response to questions about the security level and the intelligence that police were getting. The police did say that the security level had been lowered slightly over the last month. It was at the second highest level that it has been since 9/11, but had been lowered slightly because the police felt that that was appropriate given the intelligence that they have had. So clearly the police, having apparently, according to today's press conference, no intelligence to lead them to believe that there would be this kind of attack in England at this time. The representatives from the London Underground, the tube station, the subway train system, have said that they will try to get the subway trains running as of tomorrow, that they will check every single train before it is allowed to go out of the station, that every single bus is going to be checked at the beginning, at the end of its journey, and that in fact some of the central London bus service, they call it the Zone 1 bus service, could be returning as of this afternoon. But clearly a high level of security still in operation, and this transport system, which certainly the tube trains, the transport system takes about 3 million people per day, and at the rush hour they have about 500 trains in operation. So that would have been the situation early this morning, and as soon as they knew that this was an attack, they have stopped the London Underground system and they evacuated people. Now, we've heard a lot about how people have described the reaction of those caught up in today's events, and we've been saying that London is not a city of panic. Britain is not a panicky nation, and they have that has been confirmed by all the transport service personnel and others who have said that they have been overwhelmed by the way people didn't panic, by the way they followed instructions, and by the way they evacuated the train stations. Although, of course, we have also heard from eyewitnesses and those caught up in it about how frightened and how scared they were of what went on and the horrible things that they saw. Fanula?
We've been listening to Christiane Amanpour updating us not only on the press conference that was held by the Metropolitan Police just a few minutes ago, but also the situation as it stands right now in London. We got a timeline not very long ago. The blast beginning at 8:51 in 3 underground locations And the number dead confirmed now at 33 in those underground locations. The number dead, though, on that double-decker bus, unclear at this point, although there are fatalities. We are told, though, investigators are not exactly clear on what that number of fatalities are. Those double-decker buses, in addition to that, being used as ambulances in order to haul some of the 300 or so injured who were brought to local area hospitals for some kind of treatment, ranging from just cuts and bruises and shock to amputations and burns and things like that. Obviously, as Christian was talking about, very devastating injuries, very difficult for the people who were, in some cases, as we heard from eyewitnesses, stepping over people in order to be able to evacuate the situation. You're also looking right now, I guess these are not still pictures, but just a moment ago we showed some pretty remarkable still pictures of the scene there. It was our first still pictures coming for us this morning, showing really, I think, clearly the sense of shock that is settling over London today. To hear the investigators say that they are shocked, but they are not surprised, that in fact they were expecting some kind of terror attack in some way, shape, or form, and had in fact in recent days lowered the terror alert threat slightly because they had no good intelligence on exactly what was to come, is a little bit obviously tough to hear, I would imagine, not only here but clearly in London as well. Let's get right back to Christian Amanpour, who's on the streets of London this morning. Christian, give me a sense of how the tone has changed in the hours that we have been covering the story. You're right about the stiff upper lip. We never got a sense of sheer panic, and yet I wonder if any of this has settled in, or is it fair to say it's just shock on the streets there?
Well, clearly it's shock amongst the eyewitnesses that we've talked to, the people who survived, for instance, the bomb blast on the bus, which wasn't that far from here, and the people who've just been walking past here, and we've sort of taken them and talked to them, have been clearly traumatized and obviously incredibly relieved to have just missed it. I mean, there, by the grace of God, they could have been blown up as well. But people who just walked by in time and simply heard and saw what had happened have obviously been very, very deeply affected by it. In other parts of London, we have seen, and I had to, cycle and walk to work this morning when this happened because it's very difficult to move around. As you know, the underground system has been closed since the attacks, the bus service as well. The only public transport are cabs, the black cabs, but they have been taken by just about everybody here who could manage to get on one. But around London, you saw a determined, effort to remain normal, to remain calm, people going about their business. Clearly, people were somewhat worried because they have not been able to use their mobile phones for the most of this day, not only because the cell system has been overloaded, but because the Vodafone, which is the biggest provider here, has apportioned some of its coverage to the emergency services. There has been a state of, many streets being cordoned off, cars not being able to go certain areas. The US Embassy in central London, not far from here, has been cordoned off for most of this day as precautions and searches and other things are underway. In some of the high streets, I watched police stop traffic and search some of the cars. Some of the barrows that sell flowers, for instance, in buckets on the side of the street were being checked. So a vigilance, but not a panic. We've reported the confirmed number of deaths, as the police have told us so far, 33 at least, but that will rise because they've told us that there were deaths at the bus and they don't know how many, and they haven't told us the number of people who were killed on the by the bomb that went off on the double-decker bus. But I think what will, be probably a subject for analysis is that the police admitted that security was slightly lower than it had been at its highest level since 9/11. They said they were at the second highest level since 9/11, and they said that they felt because that was appropriate given the intelligence they were getting. So clearly, basically saying they had not either sufficient or no intelligence to indicate that this was a possibility. Prime Minister Blair, who is now back in London at Downing Street, having left the Gleneagles Summit, is conducting the business. It's called the meeting of the Cobra Group of his senior security officials and ministers who've been dealing with this to see what they can do and to see how much of his time is going to be spent here in London before he goes back to meet President Bush and the other world leaders who are still Sporting Gleneagles, dealing with the subject of trying to help the poor in Africa and trying to deal with climate change and global warming. Soledad?
Christian, you know, you mentioned one sure focus of analysis is that lowered security threat. And another one I would imagine is a close examination of this timeline. When you look at the timeline that was given to us by the Metropolitan Police, you see 8:51, the first bomb explosion, 9:47, the explosion on the bus. 26 minutes elapsed, though, between the three explosions underground. And then we heard from, I think it's Tim O'Toole, the American, I believe, who's running the underground, where he essentially said that no, they didn't warn their drivers. There was never a message sent out to the drivers to stop because they didn't have that information. At this point, does this underscore, or is this a big red flag in a lack of preparedness as far as the underground goes?
Well, clearly the days to follow will bring more answers on that. But what he also said was that they couldn't immediately stop because they had to get people out of the tunnels, that they have hundreds of thousands of people in those tunnels, and their first reaction was try to get them out, those who weren't in the immediately affected areas, to get them out of those tunnels. But yes, you know, they said clearly that at first they had thought that it was a power surge, and that was the first report that people got publicly, because the explosion, the first evidence of the explosions was a disruption on the power grid, or the way they read the power. It showed a power fluctuation, and so that was their first analysis, and then very quickly thereafter it became clear that this was not the case, and that it was a series of explosions.
Christiane Amanpour is leading our coverage out of London this morning. Christiane, thank you. Obviously, she's going to continue to report for us. We are getting information now about the casualties. As she mentioned, 33 confirmed dead. That is not taking into account the number of dead on that double-decker bus, because while there are fatalities there, officials say they are not yet in a position to actually give that number. Some have said that bus was packed with people, and others said when they heard the explosion and they turned around, they could see that bus halfway in the air, to quote an eyewitness. Miles?
We've heard from the President of the United States today urging people to be vigilant here. No word, however, from the Department of Homeland Security indicating the official national threat level would be changed. Michael Chertoff, the Secretary of Homeland Security, indicating a little while ago, we do not have any specific intelligence indicating this type of attack is planned in the United States, but we are constantly evaluating both intelligence and our protective measures, and we'll take whatever actions are necessary. We're going to hear from Mr. Chertoff in about a half an hour. We'll bring you that live. In the meantime, let's go to CNN's John King, who's been tracking the response all across the United States today. People are taking to heart the President's urgings, Mr. Chertoff's urgings, to exercise prudent vigilance. Right, John?
That is true, Miles, and we have some new information, and let's bring us to our viewers. As you noted, the national threat level will stay for the time being at yellow, which is an elevated threat level. It has been at that yellow stage for quite some time. But what the Secretary of Homeland Security, Michael Chertoff, among the steps he will announce in about a half an hour here in Washington in his news conference, is that they are going to threat level orange, which is a higher risk of terrorist attack, only on mass transit systems around the country. The administration deciding to take that step, of course, in the wake of these London attacks. They will take that step despite, we are told, what Mr. Chertoff will say is no specific credible intelligence of any kind suggesting that there are any attacks planned on mass transit systems in the United States or anywhere in the United States for that matter. But after a number of conversations this morning involving Homeland Security officials, intelligence officials, White House officials, and others, they have decided to raise the threat level specifically with regards to mass transit systems nationwide. And we're also getting information from our Justice Department producer Terry Frieden that they are specifically worried about 5 cities, and those cities are Boston, New York, Washington, D.C., Miami, and Atlanta. So information has gone out to those 5 cities. Be extra vigilant. The threat level for mass transit systems will go up, we are told, in about 30 minutes to orange, again, specifically for mass transit systems. And among those, of course, the many local officials who will have to deal with the fallout of all of this is the mayor of this city, Washington, D.C. Mayor Anthony Williams was at a hearing earlier today about a very separate issue, the issue of closing military installations around the country. But Mayor Williams spoke to reporters and tried to assure the people of Washington, D.C. that he is in touch with the federal government and taking every precaution, especially with the metro system here, which has more than 1 million passengers a day. Let's listen to Mayor Williams.
I want to take the opportunity to reassure people that we've been in touch with the Secretary of Homeland Security, that while we have no evidence of any intelligence indicating an attack on our city here and on our region here, we are taking extra precautions to ensure the safety of our transportation infrastructure and our system for the people that use it. And also take this opportunity to ask people to join with us, to keep their eyes and ears open as they go about their daily business, and if they find anything unusual, to alert our authorities.
Again, that Mayor Tony Williams a short time ago here in Washington, D.C. summarized quickly, Miles. Again, we are told the national threat level will stay at yellow, but it will be elevated to orange specifically for mass transit systems around the country. The Secretary of Homeland Security, Michael Chertoff, will make that announcement in less than 30 minutes here in Washington. We are told by several administration sources. And to many around the country, Michael Chertoff might be an unfamiliar face. Tom Ridge, of course, became a household name in the days, weeks, and months after the September 11th attack. Secretary Chertoff is a former prosecutor, a former judge. He is now running the Department of Homeland Security. So a test for him as the United States responds to these attacks in London. Also a test for the new Director of National Intelligence, Miles. We are told John Negroponte was in the office at 6 a.m. He has been in touch with the President's traveling party overseas, and a statement from the Director of National Intelligence from his office says they obviously are analyzing all the intelligence the United States has in its possession. One of the key areas of interest right now is doing anything they can to help the British government find out who is responsible for these attacks in the London subway system. Miles?
John, in the history of the color-coded national threat warning system, I can't recall a specific sector like this being singled out. What does that mean as a practical matter, that mass transit is orange?
Well, as we spoke earlier, the system has been criticized by many that you have a national alert go up and down when then the officials come out and say they have no specific intelligence. This is one of the adjustments they have made, if you will, to respond to that criticism, saying that why would you go up nationally if you perceive the threat only to be in Washington or New York? Why would you go up nationally if across the country if you perceive the highest risk to be only on mass transit systems? So the people of Montana and the people of Idaho, obviously, if the interest is mass transit, don't have to worry as much as the people of New York or Atlanta or Washington, D.C. So they have tried these incremental adjustments, more targeted adjustments, if you will, to the threat level. They believe that makes it more effective, A, in alerting the public where they should be most worried, and perhaps even more importantly in terms of dedicating the personnel, the money, and the resources necessary to beef up security in those narrowly more specific areas of interest.
All right. And apparently there have been cases in recent years where, say, the financial district of New York has been targeted. So I guess that is not unprecedented. It's just, obviously, they're working with this system because there was a backlash for a while, wasn't there?
There certainly was. Mayors and police chiefs and sheriffs and members of Congress, people all across the country have said, you're scaring us, essentially, or in the case of many of these mayors, you're forcing us to spend hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars on police overtime, but you're not telling us what to look for. You're saying be worried, but you're saying there's no specific information. How do I know how to deploy my police department? How do I know whether to send them to the subway system or to the port or to the baseball game? So there have been a lot of complaints that you get these vague warnings from the government, and of course the government's response is if they don't have specific information but they do have worries, if they did not pass that on, they would certainly be criticized after the fact if something happened. So it is far from a perfect system. Everybody involved acknowledges that. What they've tried to do, Miles, is fine-tune it as they go along based on experience. And today is one of those experiences that will test the system.
Well, I guess the worst-case scenario is when people tune it out entirely, and that's one scenario which no one wants to see. John King, thank you very much. Kelly Wallace has been also looking at the domestic response. Something like this, of course, has ripple effects all throughout the world. Kelly joins us from our New York newsroom. Kelly?
And Miles, some of the first hints we were getting that perhaps some cities, including Boston, might be taking some of these increased security steps. Massachusetts Governor Mitt Romney indicating that he had decided to increase the security level on Boston's system, which I know you know very well, the T, and indicating that this was sort of similar, going on to a heightened alert, similar to the federal code orange alert. So giving some indication a little bit ago about this taking place. Also, we know Atlanta, one of the other cities mentioned, increasing its security presence on the MARTIR system in Atlanta. Of course, New York City we've been talking about quite a bit, especially because of the heightened alert here after the September 11th attacks. We can tell you some new information. We know that Governor George Pataki, as well as New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg and the New York City Police Chief Ray Kelly will be holding a news conference at 12 noon, and that will be held at Grand Central Station. We're expecting to get more information there. We know that police have kind of increased the presence all around the subway system and bus systems throughout the city. Some of the police staging exercises to have their police presence known daily throughout the financial district. We understand they have been redeployed to the subway systems as well. We also know, we're hearing from a spokesman with the New York City Police Department, that we are going to have authorities saying that there's increased security at, quote, United Kingdom related locations, not elaborating on what those locations would be. New Jersey Transit, another major system, thousands and thousands of people using that system on a daily basis to get in and out of Manhattan. We understand police patrols on that system have doubled. We're also being told that the number of bomb detecting K9 units on the system has tripled. Nationwide, Amtrak, which goes through nearly every state in the country, has decided to increase its security level. Officials saying this is being done not in response to any specific threat, but as a precaution, part of the increased security. More officers, more K9 teams on trains, also alerting employees and passengers to be on the lookout for any suspicious activity and any suspicious packages. Other cities we're looking at across the country, Chicago, an increased security presence there as well. More officers around the mass transit system, the L in Chicago, as well as in the central business district, and then going out on the West Coast as well. We understand their officials have opened what they call a special command center, and this is to monitor what's going on, increased activity. The buzzwords today, Miles: vigilance, be on the lookout for any suspicious activity, at the same time alerting people not to panic and to try and go about their daily lives.
So on the one hand, we should remind people that there is no specific intelligence that anything is going to focus on the United States. But on the other hand, we should be reminded that British officials just told us they had no specific intelligence that this was going to occur. So I think you have to balance those 2 points, don't you, Kelly?
You certainly do, and this is the difficulty for really officials, law enforcement officials, lawmakers throughout the country, local officials in cities and states around the country, because they are obviously trying to alert people to be aware. They are trying to increase the security presence after the blasts in London. At the same time, they're encouraging people, and they know people rely on mass transit to get from place to place and to get to their jobs. And it's interesting also because I was forwarded the email that our Justice Department producer Terry Frieden, who's been talking to officials about some of these increased security measures going up to the orange threat level for the mass transit system in some of these cities. Also, one of the officials who talked to emphasizing the measures are precautionary, not based on specific intelligence, and stressing federal officials say there is no reason for alarm in the 5 cities and that they're trying to avoid any sense of public panic. Obviously a challenge, certainly on a day like today.
Certainly is a tightrope to walk. Kelly Wallace, thank you very much. Let's just underscore what's coming up for you. At 11:45 Eastern Time, about 20 minutes from now, Michael Chertoff, who is the Secretary of Homeland Security, will make an announcement, we're told by CNN's John King, to elevate the national threat level specifically for mass transit systems to orange or high. And these are mass transit systems in Boston, New York, Washington, Miami, and Atlanta that are of particular focus and concern to the administration right now. Also, about 15 minutes later, noon Eastern Time, we expect to hear from New York City officials as well. So we're juggling briefings and news conferences and information as it comes in. We'll keep you posted. Soledad.
Yeah, there's some details that we should share as well that have come to us from the Metropolitan Police in London that I think are somewhat interesting. The underground spokesperson, Tim O'Toole, saying that no one was ever trapped inside those trains that were stopped by the explosions. He said, in fact, that it was a controlled move. I'm not sure if that's just semantics, if you're one of the people stuck underground for 25 minutes while smoke is pouring into your subway car. But he said that it took a long time, especially on the Piccadilly line, to get them clear because the access, frankly, in the underground is quite difficult. There was a theory. One of the people in this press conference, the Assistant Deputy Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, talked about this 4th bomb that was on the double-decker bus. And what he said was that the fourth bomb may have been intended for an underground train. It may have, in fact, been exploded at an inappropriate time, and that it may have been destined for the underground network. Other information that we're getting, no power surge. In fact, all these breakers tripped, and officials thought that might indicate a surge. Thus, the mistaken original reports that we got that there was some kind of power surge. And also, no indication as of yet it's a suicide bomber or conventional explosives. That is obviously a very big focus of the investigation at this point. Let's listen in to what one eyewitness describes she saw.
Was tended to by the paramedics and the tube staff in the concourse. There was, I guess, another 5 of us, similar conditions, sitting around, just wrapped in blankets, and had some cooling pads placed on the burns. So I guess I'm not sure in terms of length of time to wait, but a couple of stretchers went in, a couple of guys on stretchers came back out again. Maybe an hour later, half hour later, difficult to say, paramedics took us into an ambulance, nearby ambulance, and we were bussed down here.
Terrible story, and of course he's one of the lucky ones. 33 people now confirmed dead. Many more, or that number we should say, will rise because the number confirmed dead on that double-decker bus. There are fatalities. Officials not releasing that number as of yet. 345 total injured, 45 critically taken to hospital. Let's get right to Jamie Rubin, formerly of the State Department. Jamie, thanks for talking with us this morning. You know, the first question I think comes to everybody's mind is who did this? Give me a sense of the short list of who may have pulled this off.
Well, I really only have one short list, and that is one of the Islamic extremist groups, cells, or offshoots of the global Islamic extremist movement that